will and volition apply for, are granted, and accept the fictitious privilege or benefit being offered, which will ultimately place you into a state of voluntary servitude. Your Social Security card and your Social Security number is actually what I like to call your international slave number. On the reverse side of that card is a QSIP number, which is required on all securities. Essentially, you've been converted into a marketable security, like a bond, and your person was offered for sale and sold to domestic and foreign corporate investors. That's the bottom line. Now, although Great Britain has no written constitution, the Constitution of the United States of America clearly states that the condition of involuntary servitude shall forever be prohibited. The key word there is involuntary. This means that your natural rights can't be converted into privileges without your consent, and privileges can't be converted into rights without the consent of the authority. Now, all power rests with the people. After all, it's the people who created government in the first place, isn't it? Since the created can't be any greater than the creator, it must follow that the government is something less than the creator, and must by its very nature be the creator's servant. Now, that is true until you voluntarily allow the servant to become your master, which is what most people have done to themselves. We've made public servants our masters. The government can't do anything for you or against you without your consent, but your consent was either given in writing, by what you said, or by your silence. So in effect, we've been cunningly coerced into voluntary servitude, and we gave up all of our unalienable rights in doing so. Now, we do have a lot of personal responsibility to take in that realization. But again, we were never taught about contracts in school, the importance of reading fine print, and the importance of understanding the power that we actually have as sovereigns. But then again, why on earth would a master teach his slave how to be free? Makes all the sense in the world to me.
It makes perfect sense to me, too. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier. We are the masters, and we've been treating them like they're the masters. This goes back to when I was talking about the people in court saying thank you when they're getting speeding tickets and fines and whatnot. What do you think about that?
Bertrand Russell wrote back in the early 20th century, or maybe it was the late 1800s, Bertrand Russell wrote that eventually the species of humankind would separate into two different species, the elite and the slaves. And the idea of the plebes revolting against the elite would be like sheep protesting their own slaughter. You know, it's just a stupid idea, but that's how the elite think of us, and how the masters of the world, the powers that be, how they perceive us. They perceive us as animals. That's very true. I know Alex mentions this a lot on his show, that the elite just put all this information out, and they think that it's the right to rule us because we're so dumb that we don't see all the information that they're putting out. And it's true, unfortunately, that the general public just doesn't listen to any of this. And it's like, here's a fine. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, God, that was driving me crazy today. It was just killing me. And I was looking around, and I wanted to educate these people so much, and I was writing on these little notepads, bursting the bubbles of government deception, but YouTube it. Please, for the love of God, watch this.
Yes, I was passing it out to everybody, the court clerks, the people who were in there, everything. And, you know, it was funny because I had attorneys standing next to me, and I was saying, well, am I obligated to fill this out, this and that? And they were laughing.
Yeah, they were laughing at you.
Yeah,
and
did you do that?
Yeah, I'm looking at her like, what? What the fuck are you laughing at?
Right, because it doesn't go in the predetermined.
Well, it's not funny it's hilarious to them, but it's not funny to us at all. It's
not funny to us one bit, but we're stepping outside of the box, and you know, the attorneys are actually one of our worst enemies because we threaten their occupation. If we start understanding the law, we threaten and defending ourselves, then we threaten their occupation. And it's funny because I know people who have gone to court and the attorneys have said, oh, that's impossible, and they go get it done themselves. The attorneys don't know the law. They think they know the law. They know procedure, and they are conditioned. They're what David I calls repeaters, and that's exactly what it is. So let's take a quick break right now, and I'm going to let David explain it to you. We'll be right back with Truth Frequency.
You ever heard that phrase, everyone knows that, mate? Well, why does everyone know that? Well, it's because this system is controlled by what I call repeaters. They're people in the situations of power and influence who just repeat what someone else tells them. A doctor is repeating what they were told medical school and what the drug companies tell them. You've got teachers who repeat what they learned in their exams or what they learned at teacher training college, and they repeat that to the next generation. And the great repeaters are what pass for journalists. This is that area outside Parliament where they stand there doing their pieces to camera telling people what's going on. Here we have the crews waiting for the journalists to come across from Westminster and stand there and tell them what's happening in the world. The fact is they don't know what's happening. They know nothing. Well, this is what they should be saying if they were telling the truth. Now over to Westminster, the latest news from David Icke. Thank you. Well, I haven't got a clue what's going on. I tell you what my job is, right? I wear a dark suit, not normally, but you know, I'm playing here. And I come over from there and I tell you what they told me is going on. And I deliver it as if I know what's going on and it's really true. I've got a clue if it's true. But they tell me, and they wouldn't lie, would they? Would Tony Blair lie about what's really happening? Would George Bush, please? I'm a journalist, trust me. And so, what we call use you, what you get paid a lot of money for reading Autocue about, is merely propaganda that they have told me and I tell you. David Icke, BBC, ITN, CNN, CBS, Sky News, Westminster.
And this is Truth Frequency with your host, Chris Gio, and the lovely, lovely socio student. She's just looking so adorable right now, ladies and gentlemen. She's sitting there with a cute little smile next to her laptop. And anyways, I'll stop that.
No, it's okay. You can keep going.
Oh, thank you. No, I don't think the people want to hear that.
Nah,
we'll save that for later or after the show.
Right.
So, welcome back again to Truth Frequency, ladies and gentlemen. We are airing a pre-recorded interview with the Anti-Terrorist. As many of you know, he is very secretive about his identity, so the only way that he would agree to the interview is if we sent him the questions and he sent us back the audio, which actually, it's turning out really, really well so far. We were speaking about police encounters, going to court, and things like that. And one thing that he said, which really flattered me, was I asked him the question, how do you handle police encounters? And he said, well, that's your specialty there. So I think he's seen some of the videos that I put out and maybe read some of the posts that I've put out. So I'm really flattered about that. And if I can flatter him back for a moment, I got to say that I hear his voice in my head when I go when I go to court or when I get pulled over. I always hear that really cool anti-terrorist voice going, do not ask any questions.
Do not answer any questions.
Do not submit to authority. It's really cool. But it was like making me sick in there, you know. I don't want to talk about the court anymore. But he did answer the question, how do you handle yourself in police encounters, and who are these police officers? And he's got some very, very good insight on that. So let's go back to his answer on that question.
The key aspect to keep in mind here is that you're dealing with another living soul. Of course, they have an agenda, and that agenda might not be in your best interest, but they're operating under certain assumptions and presumptions that have been conditioned into them during their training, and no doubt from practical experience in dealing with the darker side of humanity. I know from watching a couple of friends in the police service that their demeanor has changed since they joined the force. They're never off the job. They're constantly looking out for suspicious or criminal activity. And that's not healthy for any psyche. It makes you twitchy and distrustful eventually. We also have to remember that these men and women see the worst of society on a daily basis, which also can't put one in a relaxed, healthy state of mind. Combine that with the fact that, for whatever reason, one of us civilians will flip out every now and then and try and take down a few officers with us. They do a difficult job under great pressure, and they should be shown the appropriate respect. The other side of the coin, though, is that they answer to a corporation, and corporations have revenue to generate and shareholders who expect a dividend. Police officers have quotas, and this is a fact that's been confirmed to me by many officers who've written to me over the last couple of years. Having a daily quota and having that quota dictate how your career goes, and therefore what food you can put on the table, puts officers in a position of having to make more stop and searches, instigate more contrived public contact situations, and ultimately make more arrests. Your best weapon in terms of dealing with a police contact is obviously knowledge of the contact process and how it's structured to play out. Knowing your rights is essential. As I've often said, if you don't know what rights you have none. Now, if you've been involved in criminal activity, in other words, if you've caused harm, injury, or loss, then you deserve to be arrested and dealt with. But generally speaking, the policy enforcement officers are enforcing statutory legislation, which, as Robert will have pointed out, only has the force of law with your consent. It'd take more time than we have to go over the countless statutory rules you may have broken just walking down the street. So we'll assume that you've been approached by an officer because you're wearing black slip-on shoes and white socks on a Wednesday, which should be against the law on any day of the week, in my opinion. But there are 3 stages the officer has been trained to execute: the contact, the detention, and then finally the arrest. You'll be approached, and the officer will undoubtedly be polite but firm, and your job is to be polite but firm in return. If the officer sees you being timid and fearful, they'll invariably interpret it as suspicious behavior and railroad you from the word go.